Welcome to the Philippines, Part 7, Crab Mentality. Crab mentality does not just exist in the Philippines, but it's often said that it's a Filipino trait. In the UK, we call it factory mentality, and I'm sure everywhere has their own version and other name for it. But generally, the reason it's called crab mentality, it's the pulling down. If you put crabs in a bucket, and you can see one climbing up, the other crabs will grab it, sort of trying to climb up on its back, as such, pulling everyone back down to the same level. This is very, very common in the Philippines. You're going to get this from all sides. The expats do it a lot, and the locals do it a lot. But the main thing is to simply just rise above it. You'll get the gossip going on. Gossip is very, very common in the Philippines. With so many people living in such a close proximity of each other, gossip is often king. The main thing is to try and maintain a reasonable standard of living and not create any issues. An example of this was somebody who rented out apartments not far from us, that he got to the Philippines, realised his partner worked in the evenings, in a profession that he wasn't too keen on, but also I think she dumped and run. He sort of went off the rails for a bit, and the flack from that was because he was bringing people back to the apartment for, let's just call it, adult entertainment. The result was that people changed the name of the street to a word that begins with F. You can fill in the gaps yourself. Now, eventually the owner of the apartments heard from his wife that this is what people were calling it, because all the tricycle drivers and everything knew it as that, because it began to get a reputation as a knocking shop for foreigners, which is obviously not what it was intentionally or correctly the type of establishment. It's actually just rental apartments, and a Canadian that had gone off the rails because of his love of his life being a prostitute. So that's an example of crab mentality, because the whole point is the gossip is pulling down the fact that somebody has a successful rental business by making out that it's rented out by foreigners that use it for prostitution. Because the other foreigners are not involved in that trade, but also that Canadian, once his 1 month was up, was off back to Canada and has not returned. But the name still sticks. And this is the thing in the Philippines: if you're seen doing something or seen somewhere you shouldn't be, and people get aware of it, news travels really fast, and it starts off as one thing and ends up as something completely different. I've discussed a friend of mine in relation to a ring before, where he invited somebody up to the house that had a ring of somebody else's, and he sat on the porch in the front of his house. I think it was actually in the garden, actually. I think the garden's actually got tiles on the grass. So he's in full view of the whole community, because he did it on purpose to make people aware that the girl didn't enter the house, because she was bringing a ring that somebody else owned that she shouldn't have had. It didn't stop the mother-in-law telling his wife that he had a woman in the house, which obviously creates some serious implications. This is why you really need to, I wouldn't say work too hard, but just be aware that people love to gossip and stir it. They like making things up. Our apartment block, we recently had somebody asking one of our tenants, that's a relative, why does she live there when it's haunted? this is the sort of nonsense people come out with. Is it haunted? Of course not. But also, it's fully renovated. It's got quite expensive flooring, bathroom, etc. In reality, it's a nice apartment. But the crowd mentality says, stir it up. Because obviously the person telling this to the person renting is another relative with a bit of a chip. These are the sort of things that happen all the time. And you may not even be aware of the person sitting smiling at you is stabbing you in the back 9 times a day. Just rise above it. I mean, for that, have I even wrote about it or spoke about it? The first time I've mentioned it is actually in this ebook or audiobook, because the reality is they like to gossip, but if you start trying to justify or get involved in what they're saying, they will move the goalposts. The whole point here is not to drag yourself down to their level. It's irrelevant. I mean, for example, the apartment issue, the guy from Canada doesn't rent out to those types of people anymore, although he's got a good crowd in now. A lot of the people stopping there are actually Filipino women with their husbands are over abroad waiting for visa processing, etc. So it's all very good people that are simply in the transition of going abroad. As such, the husbands want somewhere where their wives can be looked after, should I say, but also under the watchful eye of another expat, to make sure that the woman herself is not going to be in any trouble, because there is some women out there that will have 5 or 6 guys on the go because they come in and out of the country at different times of the year. They can actually manage their relationships quite well and take monthly allowances off all of them, etc., etc. So be aware. You're going to be talked about a lot. You're the only foreigner probably in your neighbourhood. The only person that people actually have an interest in actually failing, because the expectation of other people failing is often much higher. So you are the one person they want to fail because it gives people something to talk about, which also gives you something to think about. That don't worry about it. Just concentrate on your life and pretty much ignore the gossip and stuff going on. Just don't give them something that's real, because the rest of it is easy. Thanks for listening.